Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Welcome everybody to Islamic Finance podcast with me, Almi Cholan, and Maryam. Maryam, how are you doing?
Doing okay.
Today will be an interesting episode continuing our overall introduction to Islamic economy and finance. This will be the end of this first short season of introduction.
Yeah.
So we will start immediately next season looking into specific issues, starting with the contracts. And people will understand why we starting with these topics immediately. But today what I want to talk about is what is Islamic finance, how it works, so general introduction. And then when we go into specifics, I think people will benefit even more. But before we go, I think we have duty to invite everybody, all of our listeners, to simultaneous sip with us, to take your favorite beverage, whether it's coffee, that's a preferred drink of the show, or a tea, herbal, I think peppermint, or what? Green tea, probably second option, not preferred option, definitely. So Bismillah, let's all do our sip with whatever beverage you have. Bismillah. Very good. That's very nice.
Yeah.
You know what's the top country in the world in terms of consumption of tea? Turkey, yeah.
I was there, I know.
What's your theory?
I think it's a really good beverage to talk over.
Yeah, I think so. In general, I have read studies that say that people, when they have in their hand something warm, they become more polite or nicer or more friendlier between each other. Now, you would be surprised how would that study be even conducted. The way they conducted the study is they had certain questions about the mood, about person happiness and other levels that they asked participants. But before they asked them, while they were filling the forms, even before interview started, they started the process. They would give them to hold something. So, for example, they are getting them to fill in the form, and as they're filling the form, interviewer says, or somebody at the reception says, "Do you mind holding this cup for me?" And it was either cold or hot. So they would record that. And then they would want to see whether that is correlated to how people respond. So there could be something to that, you know. So that's why it's very important that if you want a maximum enjoyment of this show, that you have a very warm drink. So, I don't have anything against those milkshakes as well. You can do that. It's not going to be the good as coffee. But,
Yeah.
or iced coffee, it's okay still, if you live in very hot areas. So today what we are talking about is Islamic finance. Now, a lot of people ask me, how did I get into Islamic finance? What interests me and things like that. And whenever I think about it, there is one event that happened to me that made me really realize importance of finance. Every year or every 2 years, I try to travel to my home country, Bosnia, Sarajevo, and I have two brothers. And when we catch up, we try to spend as much time together. And sometimes we like to travel, so we take the car and travel around the region. I remember, long time ago, my youngest brother, both of them are twins, younger than me. One of them used to work in the conventional bank. So as we were traveling across Bosnia, beautiful mountains, regions, rivers, lake, whatever you can think of, the most beautiful in the world, that's the destination. As we were traveling, wherever we would go, my younger brother used to tell us, "I have a client here and there." And he didn't work even in the biggest bank of all of them. It was a medium bank, but no matter where you go, small village, 3 people, he has a client. I remember we were on the trip and those clients were like baker, politician, anything. In one instance, as we were driving, one of the politicians called him And he asked him, he was defaulting on the loan. So he asked extension because he was the head of the debt collection. And he used to tell us the story. He would go to Switzerland. He would find people on the internet and then chase them for the money they took. So anyway, they would always call him to reduce the debt or something when they couldn't pay. So one of these politicians once called him and said, do you know who I am? Meaning, like, why don't you erase this, eliminate debt for me? So he told him, do you know who I am? He said, who are you? This, because politicians usually they are top of the hierarchy. They think they are not, no one is above them. So he said, who are you? He was confused, like he thought, like, who are you? So he says, I'm the guy who works for the bank that you owe money. So, I mean, what do you want? I mean, that's it. You have to bring your money. So as we were traveling and as I was looking and he's having all of these clients, no matter how big town or small, I realized how deeply banks are integrated into every part of economy. So you could even go to smallest of these places, but they are financing, for example, some factory or something like that. And so that day I learned two things about banking, very important things, that banks and bankers, they have clients everywhere, no matter where you go in the face of the earth. And second thing I learned about bankers, which is maybe even more important than the first one, is that bankers know the best restaurants. Because wherever we would go, he would know the restaurant. Now, you ask yourself, how does he know these restaurants? Well, that's where he meets all of those clients.
For those hot beverages.
So that's what you need to know about the bankers. In fact, I had one person that I used to, from time to time, talk. He was a big banker here in Australia. He was the head of massive department that used to collect money for tens of billions of dollars for Australia. And it was a conventional bank. And I remember he would say that one of the most difficult jobs for him, not that it was that difficult, but interesting, let's say, was that as he would go around the world to find these institutional other investors to invest in banks and build Australia, that's how he saw himself building Australia. He said one of the interesting things that you as a banker needed to do is have a good stomach. And the good stomach means you can handle all kinds of food. So I asked him, what was the most interesting food you had in your life? So he said one time he was, I think, in China somewhere, and they served these, some kind of insects or something like that. That is a trouble, you see, that these poor bankers have to go through to get to the money. So it's not easy, I think, not easy. So alhamdulillah for Islamic finance and Islamic banks, and at least it's halal, and I enjoy it. I remember that when one of my friends, I think we were in Kuala Lumpur, and he took me to one of these halal Chinese restaurants. And believe me, out of hundreds of foods, I could eat only few, and mostly sweets. I guess I'm not cut for a banker. I don't have a good stomach. I can't handle most of this food, So we used to discuss with my brothers on that trip around Bosnia about what would you do if you have a lot of money. I remember while we were traveling, we heard the news on the radio that somebody in US, or one of the countries, Western countries, won lottery, I don't know, like a couple $100 million, let's say $500 million, I think, or some crazy number, hundreds of millions of dollars. I thought, like, okay, so let's say we don't play those games like that, but let's say you inherited $500 million. What would you do? And often when I talk to students, I ask them, what would you do with the $500 million? Like if I ask you, what would you do? Let's say all of your necessities are taken care of, and then what do you do?
Just let the money grow, put it somewhere. Invest it into something. Put in a few different industries, see what works, what doesn't. You can't, there's a point where you reach, you have everything.
Yeah, you have everything and other people have.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing to think about. What would you do with $500 million? And you have everything you could have in terms of your transportation, your houses, and everything else. More and more I thought about it. I thought, like, how good would it be if you could use that money to become a partner, whether it's a small baker that we talked about, where he'll be rewarded and compensated really for his work and grow as his investment grow, or a hospital or research engineering firm, how great feeling would that be? That's when I realized the power of the banks and financial institutions. If the people who have changed the way we do business today didn't have the opportunity to do it, and how many people in the garages now sit, especially amongst the Muslims, who could be re-engineering how we live and how the future is looking based on certain values. That for me opened my mind to the possibility that if we had connection between these financial institutions and the people and the ideas, we could create different kind of lifestyle. So this is where idea for me about Islamic finance, banking and Islamic economy really, and the link in terms of restoring economic and financial justice. So here is the question and a small story that I reckon if our listeners understand, anybody who can understand this following story, you understand everything there is about the core issue of Islamic finance. So the story is like this. Some time ago, father and a son who went for the picnic, and they traveled to some faraway place, and when they came to that location, the rain started falling and everything was wet around them. Before they were able to even put a tent and secure themselves, they were wet, their things were wet, everything around was wet. At that moment, friends of a father came to that location. And by that time, everything was wet, and then the rain stopped. So the father said to his friends that he wants to make them warm and get them a nice tea, just like we see. Tea, always coffee, some nice beverage, to warm them up. And he said to his son, look, my son, these are my guests. As you know, our custom is to bring them this beautiful drink, tea. Please go and make it. Young boy went to search for something to make a fire with. But no matter where he went, everything was wet. Because of the rain, he could not find anything that was dry to start the fire with. While he was searching, he remembered then his father has got some metal box in his things. And inside that metal box, he keeps this money. So what he knows about this money is that it's made from paper. And because it was in a metal box, it's secured. There was no possibility the rain would come in. And what he knows about paper is that it's very good fuel for fire. So he goes gather all of the money on one big pile. He set it on fire. And money burns beautifully with all different colors, and he cooks tea very quickly. With that freshly brewed tea, he presented that to the father, and his father, looking at his son, he said, "Mashallah, look at my son, beautiful son." He didn't say Mashallah. He just said, "Look at my beautiful son, how smart he is. There is no piece of wood that is dry around us, and he still managed to cook us the tea." So everybody was happy with that. So the question is, what do you think father will think when he finds how his son made the tea? What do you think is the problem?
He didn't understand the value of what he was doing, what he was using.
He didn't understand value of money. Okay, that's important. Obviously, money is very important, very valuable.
And he wasn't using it as it should be used.
Right, and that's the main thing. He didn't use money as it should be used. So how did he use it?
It's fuel.
He used it as a fuel. And that is not intended purpose for the money. So what would be intended purpose in this case?
Go buy some wood with the money.
Yeah, exactly. If he went and used the money as it's supposed to be used, as a medium of exchange, to buy something, wood, for example, for fire, and then use the wood as a fuel to make a tea, no problems. So the point of this story is that no one has a problem with the tea. The tea and the end product or the profit is never a problem. What is the problem is the way you do it. Okay? So if we can understand that lesson, that's the essence of Islamic finance. What Islamic finance or Islamic commercial principles are trying to restore. And that is that everything is put in its right place. Everything is used for its correct purpose. So assets are used for the correct purpose, money for correct purpose, and so on. When we get the profit from the incorrect use of money, we call that illegitimate profit. That would be your interest or usury or riba or all of the terms. They are the same thing anyway for us. Some technical differences in some other ideologies, which we will tackle later on. But for us as a Muslims, any kind of gain from illegitimate use of money is prohibited riba. Okay? So what does that mean, for example? When you have a money, you can basically use it as a commodity itself that is sold. In this case, that commodity was burnt. So you use it as a commodity. Or you can use it to buy and sell something, right? To facilitate a trade. When you profit from buying and selling something, that's fine. If you profit from selling money by itself, and that's where we have a little bit of a problem. For money to be useful, must be converted in some other asset that is useful in itself. Then you can use that asset to sell it or lease it or do something real with it. So that's a basic idea, which is why the difference between Islamic banking and the conventional banking is that when they are using money, they use it as a commodity that is sold and they're taking profit from that. So in Islamic banks, they have to buy something with the money and then they sell the assets. Okay, so that's a core difference, how they treat the money and what is their core business. Selling and buying assets or selling and buying money by itself. Therefore, profit from all of these different activities is very different, and one is connected then with real things and economy and providing benefit. That's what Islam wants to focus, where other one is disconnected and then it provides different sort of reality. So Islamic banks then, in terms of how they would practically do it in their everyday banking, they would need to find a way where they are partnering with people or they're buying and selling, or there is some sort of connection. They break that money for money transaction. So for example, let's say in a typical bank deposits, let's say account, the way you bring money into the bank would be through some sort of a partnership, let's say model. There could be different models, but let's say some sort of mudaraba, where a bank is like a manager of other people's money, and then they mobilize money for the purpose of utilizing it for some Sharia compliant activity. And that way, depositors and the bank acting as a manager on behalf of those deposits would do something with that money where they could generate profit and share. On the other side, when they are financing, bank now as a manager would use that to finance or enter into partnership with, let's say, customers when they are buying and selling the homes. So in that case, most desirable would be some sort of equity financing arrangement through, let's say, musharaka or something like that, where customer and bank would enter into as partners. They would finance the home. Person would be renting property. There would be profit involved for the other party. And over time, ownership would be passed or purchased by a customer. So you would have people with the money through the management of the bank partnering with other people in society to acquire certain property and assets, whether it's for business or private. It's all part of a real economic activities. If you compare that to your conventional, where it is purely money for money, whether it's deposit or financing, unless it's equity financing in some startups and so on, you would have huge difference in a way that, let's say, loan in conventional bank and financing at Islamic bank are treated. So what you would have situation, because now Islamic bank would have to have some ownership in asset, that would create natural incentives and a way to restrict banking behaving irresponsibly and unethically. You see, the major problem with today's banks is that they don't have a skin in game. They are not affected by what they do. In fact, they can do whatever they want and they can sell these loans, as we talked about global financial crisis, and they can still make money from being very irresponsible. They are not touched by what's happening in the real economy. They are disconnected. When you have equity, when you are partnering, when you have that skin in the game, if that game or if that economy is burning, you will be burnt as well. And so you want that natural regulation to balance the huge power that banks normally have. And the only way you can balance that if you connect their profit with liability. Once you can make a profit without liability or reality attached to it, then you have very dangerous situation. So that's why the treatment when it comes to even customer not able to pay for loan or financing, it's treated differently. Because on one side you have, let's say, debt, on another side you have a bank that is exposed through some ownership. Of course, not every instrument in Islamic banking and financing is equity as well. There are some more simple transactions where you either just sell with a markup. You don't have that underlying link with the asset anymore. But that is transaction where it has a little bit different risk profile. Not every transaction is necessarily equity. Some are debt-based, where you straight up leasing or selling. In those situations, it's a little bit different treatment. Now, because Islamic banks are involved in real life, in real economy, when we engage in that, we need to understand a lot of different rules because banks need to be involved in economy. I remember I was a few years ago in one of these Islamic banks in Pakistan visiting, and I was talking in Mizan Bank and talking with one of the young muftis there in their headquarters. And he was telling me how he was dealing with a business person and his lawyer about structuring a deal, financing arrangement. And he was explaining something to the lawyer, something to the businessman, and they were trying to do the deal. So I was thinking, like, it's incredible that you have this young person trained in traditional Sharia sciences, understands the law, understands the business, and he's trying to work out the deal. The skill set is enormous that you need, right? Yeah. And that for me signifies what a real benefit is of Islamic banking and finance, which is that it brings those ethics into what normally is thought as secular domain, law, business. Now you have this young man who can bring all of that from ethical perspective into the commercial reality, and he can work out the best, what is the best arrangement. So when I saw that, I realized if we look at Islamic finance just in a very narrow aspect and don't think about it as a way of doing business, understanding that this is the driving engine of our economy, then we miss the point. If we just reduce Islamic finance just as it is on the conventional side, just some sort of loans and things like that, we are missing the point. Which is why when we are studying these things as we go along, we will have to understand a bit more about business transactions in Islam, a bit more about prohibitions and so on. So not just purely ways, how do we finance, but underlying mechanism of all of these business transactions. So this is what we will, inshallah, try to master. How does that sound to you so far?
We all need to know to the level of business that we're engaged in our life, we need to know. Because we're all engaged in some sort of transaction or other, even on a day-to-day basis, buying coffee. And we just need to know these things. And just because everyone's doing it, because we live in a secular society, just because everyone's doing it, doesn't mean it's correct. And we need to know to be able to differentiate between it.
Exactly. That's why, if you remember, we mentioned in the beginning, do people actually need to know about Islamic finance, as let's say, as Muslims? And most of the scholars would say, yes, it is obligation on you to know up to the level that you are involved in transactions and finance and business, anything to do with money and contracts and so on. So what is then Islamic finance? If we are to look for a definition, so I'd say usually that Islamic finance represent financial and business activities that are consistent with the principles of Islamic law or the Sharia, and that prohibits unethical, immoral, speculative activities such as interest, gambling, uncertainty, and so on. In another sense, Islamic finance encourages entrepreneurship, mutual cooperation, generosity, and a spirit of partnership, which connect the capital owner with real economic activities that may actually contribute to the welfare of society via commerce, manufacturing, construction, and so on. Usually when we talk of some of the principles, prohibition of certain transactions like riba and gharar, we mentioned prohibition of certain categories, asset classes that have detrimental impacts on society, like profiting from, let's say, alcohol or gambling or tobacco and so on. Existence and connection to underlying assets, to the real economy, and profiting from taking on liability, from doing something that is real. So these are some of the core principles. There is a very strong voice of criticism. In fact, just before this, a friend of mine sent me the video, somebody making a YouTube talk about how Islamic finance is all deception and how the certain people trying to, do whatever, exploit the faith and do these kinds of things. When I look at criticism, I divide it in criticism that is real, coming from educated people who are aware of what's happening and know what's happening, and they're criticizing very specific aspects of Islamic finance industry. And that is a fair criticism. But there is a lot of criticism that is ill-intended. There is a lot of criticism that is uninformed, speculative, or is generic. Oh, all of this is wrong. So it doesn't make sense. Everything needs to be looked specifically. I have actually recorded the whole series criticizing certain transactions, Islamic Finance Clinic, if people want to look at my YouTube channel, where I go in specific trends that do exist. One of the trends that I very strongly criticize is that when we try to commercialize the loans. A loan is when I give you cash and I take more cash from you, money for money transaction. Because in Islam, there should be never a situation where you get the money and then you pay more for the money you got. You understand? A loan is benevolent, charitable act. Incentives for giving loans are there to help people who need it, not to profit from that kind of activity, which is very different from financing the home. That's why Islamic Bank cannot give you just money out. They have to engage in transaction. They have to buy, and then they sell you the homes. And that's the difference. When you buy a home or you buy a car and you sell it or lease it for a profit, that's fine. That is now commercial transaction. Non-interest banking is different from non-profit banking, right? Which you go back to how we make a tea from the original discussion. Making profit from commercial transaction with underlying asset is fine. Making profit from other things, which is money for money, is not fine. Which is why in Quran we have a verse that talks about people who will come on the day of judgment like the one who is being hit by shaitan into insanity. And the reason for this is that they used to say that riba and trade are two similar things. And the reason why they were looking is that you profit from riba, you profit from trade. What's the difference? You are profiting. Well, the thing is, as with the tea, it's not the tea that is the problem. It's from what? So if you get money from selling money as a commodity or burning money, that's not fine. That's not legitimate. That is the riba in the profit. But if you make money from commercial transactions, just like anybody else, produce something, finance something, sell something, you put that asset in the circulation in economy, somebody's using and benefiting. When you get that new iPhone, you benefiting, so you should be paying profit for that. But when you get money, you need just to return the money. That's how the rule in Islam is. A lot of lessons, a lot of beautiful wisdom we'll talk about when we come to that topic, you understand? But whenever we transact based on real things, which you benefit from, and somebody put an effort to create and make, obviously there needs to be a profit. That's how we earn the livelihood, yeah? So that is the one very important thing. But unfortunately, there are trends in Islamic finance and banking where those who are very smart and talented are using that talent and knowledge of the contract to create a third type of contract that I call. Okay, so normally when we look at it, we would say, is something riba or trade? So if it is a result of trade, profit is fine. If it is a result of money for money, it's not fine. But there is a third type of transactions that I call synthetic trade. So these are fake transactions. This is where we see some people use the trade to just buy and sell without really that asset going into any kind of usage. So there are a lot of these tricks or synthetic transactions that are a fake trade. You're not sure, is this trade because there is an asset on the document, but it's not real trade because no one ends up using that asset. So there are ways where the loan is then created and the profit is taken. That's something that I criticize. So these transactions that are of synthetic nature, that some banks engage, where they earn profit from basically giving like loans for extra profit. And then the asset is just used to recycle it so that it appears it's coming from the trade. But that asset is there just to create appearance in a contract that it's trading something, that somebody's actually end up going to use that. It's never going to be used for anything. It's just there, just on a contract. So it doesn't have a life, doesn't have a usage. So this is something that Islamic finance industry has to tackle. But that's something that we need to educate people, find the solutions. Also, these Islamic banks, many of them are very risk averse. They are just transitioning into it. I remember when I went to Egypt some years ago, when they just started to transition in Islamic banking, and a lot of Islamic banks just wanted to quickly convert everything to Islamic banking and finance. And so over the time, they're trying to fix that. And the thing is that many of these principles, they were kind of lost. We lost them for 100 or more, 200 years. So now we are institutionalizing this and bringing it back since 60s and 70s, since the early thinkers started thinking, how do we actually institutionalize these principles and make them into modern products. And so you see the efforts from Egypt with their banks in 60s and 70s to Dubai Islamic Bank, Islamic Development Bank, Pakistani banks, Malaysian banks. Huge efforts early on, which later on resulted in what we have now, which is a very vibrant industry. But are we there yet? What this could be also, we are not there yet. So there is a lot that we need to adjust ourselves, especially when it comes to the appetite, to the risk and more risky things, which is why when I visited Dubai Islamic Bank, their Sharia advisory board, and we had a beautiful chat about what they are doing and thinking in terms of trying to diversify the way that they use their own capital. And one of the things that when I talk to these bankers and others in Sharia circles, anybody really who is influencing this, from academics to advisors to bankers themselves, investors, is that we need to re-engineer how our institution engage in life and try something new, finance something new, finance startups, develop those skills. Just as I said in Mizan Bank, the young man who has all of these confidence and skills to engage in real thing. And from that, they create enormous value. Mariam, do you have any thoughts?
I think it's very important for young people who are already empowered in everything else to also be empowered with their finances, especially if they can do it Islamically and ethically. Otherwise, you're just all the other empowerment is not empowerment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You need to be able to stand on your own feet and be able to see what's going on.
Absolutely. From personal finances to get them in order, to the way you work and save and invest and think about wealth. And even us as a Muslim, when you think about where do we get some ideas? In the West, normally when you go even to the Muslim and you say, complete the sentence, money is the root of all evil. So where does that concept come from?
The Bible.
Yeah. And even in the Bible doesn't say that exactly. It says that love of the money is the root of all evil. Or when people say time is
money.
Okay, so you see how this interest-based system is influencing our thinking. Time is money. Like, what does that actually mean? This is what builds the interest-based system. Time for money.
It's also people are now always like, oh, it's all about the hustle and just making money, and everyone's just it's always like, oh, I have to be doing something. People have full-time jobs, and then they also want to have a small business, and they want to be making money when they're even asleep.
Right.
And it's like all the time. That's all that people think about.
We live life that is out of the balance. So we don't appreciate free time. We don't appreciate relationships. Our Islamic lifestyle goes beyond just money. You invest your time in other people. Just like you invest your money into business and you gain dividends and profit and share in the losses. I often say when you invest time into relationship with other people, you get dividends from when they are happy and something good happen because you are invested and you see them happy, you become happy. And when you are unhappy because you are invested and you talk with them about it, they take some of your worry, you diversify your grief. So your happiness goes up when you are connected and invested with other people, and the currency is time, not money. At the same time, your worries and grief is diversified with other people. So Islamic lifestyle is much more broader than just money investment. When you invest with somebody, your time, your money, your knowledge, your friendship, it's a different relationship. It's almost like we think about society in a 3D concept, observing not just from this two-dimensional transaction of money, but you have another dimension, which is relationship. And when you create a different relationship in the community, in the people that you're doing business with, think about it as if you are in the middle of the box, filling it from the inside, which is how your heart and your emotions and every inside of you is. It's not just one dimension. It's so many different things. And reality is that is where the balance is found. It is only that kind of person who can later turn around and say, you know what, I will create a product that will be beneficial to these people that I'm working with. Or if I find somebody who is worse off, I will be more than happy to share the produce of my work, my income, whatever I have with that person who is not blessed with that. For you, living connected life with the understanding of what is money, what is the relationship, what is the time, what's your role, what's your connection with the community and society, you will be a different kind of person, which is why you see in Islamic history when companions of the Prophet ﷺ used to talk about their rich people. They view them as a people who are so much closer to God, not because they were rich, but because they were doing all of the normal things that you would expect them to do in terms of worship and getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but because they were using all of that wealth to help anybody who needed anything. So their money was running away from them faster than they could catch it. And the other people were saying, well, how can we run after these people? Look at what they're doing, which is opposite in capitalism. The dollar comes in the pocket of these people, never see the light of the day again. Nobody trusts them. You need to have the huge government hand to reach those pockets. This is the difference. Now we look those people as evil, almost, those huge corporation capitals, because the way they're making profit is exploitative. The way they contract is exploitative. The way they give you money is exploitative. And they themselves don't have any value or anything. They just live for that. And that's why this tension is created. So what we want is to restore all of these things, right? Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. So that is, in general, little introduction of Islamic finance. I hope as we move forward, next week we start second season. As I said before, the podcast will be structured topic by topic. This was the first introduction to Islamic finance and economy. Broad outline of the challenges and opportunities and framing it. Now we are going into next week, into the first important topic, which is law of contract. Contract is the core, the most important thing. Those students that I teach, and I have been teaching that for a long time now, and I can see those students who actually understand the contract and they can break transaction down, break the contract down properly and understand. They have no problems later on taking apart any kind of transaction, no matter how complex that transaction is, whether it's a complex derivatives or simple home financing or the new products and so on. Those people who understand how the basis of contract and transactions work in commercial sense, they can easily figure out what's happening later on. And they are very good at structuring the new solutions for whatever comes up in our economy. Thank you for listening, everybody. Hope you will subscribe to our email list and our social media channels. You will share this with your friends. If you are new to this topic, if this was the first podcast that you are listening, check out 3 Pillars of Islamic Economy. I think it was the 3rd episode that we recorded to see maybe a bit more fuller picture of what we are talking about here. And inshallah, we'll see you next week. Send us any comments or questions, how we can improve. And also, if you want to suggest some people that we might interview for the show, leave the comments or tag those people. And we'll see you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.